I was asked to do a history of how TRE developed. Okay, so I lived in this beautiful seminary for a year where I studied liberation theology, and now it was time to send me internationally so I could experience what it was like to work in and live in other countries. So the first place they sent me to was the Middle East. Now I lived in several places because of the bombing, and we would move around a little bit depending on where the safest area of the city was. My experience of the shootings and bombings that I had to endure while I was there was really the beginning of how TRE started. There were two experiences that I had that were very common there. One, of course, if we would hear shooting starting or we'd hear a mortar shell going overhead, we would all duck like this. And it fascinated me because we all did it together. It was as though it was choreographed. All of us did it at the same time. That was the beginning of me asking, how does our brain do something to the body, a specific muscle pattern actually, and make the body pull into a fetal position just like that? The second one was that many times before, during, or after these experiences of shootings and bombings, we would find ourselves shaking. Now, like most people, we would laugh about it, tell ourselves to calm down, it was okay, it will go away in a minute. But I saw the shaking and I experienced it within inside myself, but still had no explanation. But something was really wrong and I didn't know what it was. And that's when I began to recognize that I had been severely traumatized. And I had to do that for about 2 years. I was going through counseling, trying to get through this process. And this is where I got introduced to bioenergetics. Alexander Lowen, who developed bioenergetics, he lived about a half hour away from me. So 3 days a week, I would go to his house and I would do bioenergetic exercises. I was familiar with the tremor mechanism. I loved it already. And I also applied to start doing bioenergetic training because it was so invaluable for me. I got my certificate in bioenergetic analysis. And during this same time, I was finishing up my degree as a social worker as well. So now I had the spiritual experiences that I had, and then I was doing clinical social work, and I was doing body work through bioenergetic analysis. So somehow those three started to come together for me. And so then that took me on my next journey, which led me to Bethlehem in the Palestinian West Bank. And I was also confronted once again with tremendous violence. There were bus bombings and shootings and arrests, mostly between Palestinians and Israelis. And it was extremely complicated. And two interesting things happened to me here. The first one was there were a group of Israelis who knew bioenergetics. So since I was certified, they would ask me to come up and do supervision or do sessions with them. Meaning we talked about the psychodynamics that was going on as they were doing the body work. We dealt with the emotions and we did sort of traditional bioenergetic analysis. However, in the Palestinian West Bank, where most people did not speak English very fluently, different from the Israelis who were quite fluent in English, they were Middle Eastern people and they thought differently and their culture was very different. So I actually simply did body work with them. I was using the skills that I had in bioenergetics, but we didn't do hitting or pounding. I didn't try to get emotions at all. I just activated the tremor mechanism and then I facilitated it moving through the body the best I could. And I was shocked because it worked really well. They didn't need to deal with me around emotions. They didn't need to deal with me around the history of their childhood or their parents or whatever other emotional issues they had. All they wanted to do was relieve stress from living in such a tense situation in life. That's when I began to see that, holy cow, this tremor mechanism has, quote, a therapeutic potential all by itself. Even without the psychodynamic component of it, it still has a potentially healing capacity within itself. Now, the second lesson was very interesting for me. I had friends in the Palestinian territories, and I had friends in Israel. What was very interesting, for about the first 3 months there, all of these different groups generally wanted me to side with them. I insisted I wasn't going to choose, and I was going to stay neutral. After about 3 months, they began to trust me. They began to trust that I was honest and sincere about not choosing a side. I actually got Palestinian friends and Israeli friends to come together, and we just did straight TRE. And it fascinated all of us, because what happened was, with no effort at all, we simply saw the human organism struggling to come back to life from its tightness and its tensions, which we all see in the TRE community. And from that is when I really solidified what I think to be TRE, in the sense that I would only use the tremor mechanism. And that was my experience. I experienced many countries and cultures and religions of people attempting to co-regulate together to live as one species. That was one of the beginning ideas around TRE, that it is a co-regulating mechanism. It can help us move together more as a unified species, because we see below cultures, language, traditions, religions, belief systems, and we see only the human species. So I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted it to be both educational, informational, and entertaining, in the sense that there's humanity involved here. And TRE was born out of some of the depth and the pain of humanity. And yet, in the depth of that pain, there was joyfulness, there was celebration, there was relationship, and it was a beautiful, life-changing experience for me.